bright, cool morning sun streamed into my garage, illuminating the dust motes dancing around the empty space where she used to be. My grandson, Tommy, stood with his arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. "It's a done deal, Grandpa," he said, his voice echoing off the concrete floor. He gestured to a portly man in a suit, holding a cashier's check. "Mr. Henderson here gave me a certified check for the full $80,000. The Mustang is his now. You should have just given me the keys when I asked." Tommy let out a short, cruel laugh. "Look at him just standing there. It's just a car. You can't even drive it anymore. I needed the money." The buyer, Henderson, shifted uncomfortably, but Tommy's confidence was absolute. He dangled a set of keys, not my keys, but freshly cut copies, in front of my face. "The title is signed, the money is in my account, and the transport truck will be here within the hour. It's over." His words were meant to be the final nail in the coffin. My neighbor, Mr. Gable from across the street, was watching from his driveway, his face a mask of pity. Tommy didn't care. He waved a thick stack of paperwork at me, a bill of sale, a copy of the title transfer he'd somehow orchestrated. The numbers were stark and clear, printed in bold ink. A price, a vehicle identification number, and a signature that looked chillingly like my own. I was perfectly and completely quartered. Every legal document seemed to prove I had willingly sold my leg's work for him. But I didn't move. I didn't rage or plead. I simply stood there, my hands clasped loosely behind my back, and offered a small, serene smile. The cool air of the garage felt calming on my skin. I met Tommy's triumphant gaze and held it, letting the silence stretch. His smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He expected a fight, a breakdown, a pathetic plea from a helpless old man. He didn't get one. He had no idea what he'd truly set in motion. I took a slow, deliberate breath, my eyes drifting to the empty patch of oil-stained concrete. The smell of gasoline and old leather still hung faintly in the air, a ghost in my pristine garage. I was about to speak, to bring his entire world crashing down around him with a single sentence. The words were on the tip of my tongue, the final move in a game he didn't even know we were playing. But months earlier, it all began on a Tuesday that felt just like any other. It began in this same garage, my sanctuary. The concrete floor was swept clean, every tool hanging in its rightful place on the pegboard, their outlines traced in black marker. The 1967 Mustang, a raven black fastback with a chrome gleam that could blind you, sat in the center of the room like a sleeping beast. I spent 4 years restoring it, bolt by painful bolt. It wasn't just metal and paint. It was the last project my wife, Eleanor, had seen me start. Her quiet encouragement was in every polished curve. That Tuesday, Tommy had stopped by, ostensibly to check in. He leaned against my workbench, scrolling on his phone, while I meticulously polished a fender. "You spend more time with this car than with your own family," he'd said, now looking up. The comment was casual, but it had a sharp, resentful edge. I just grunted in response, the familiar scent of carnauba wax filling the air. He didn't understand. He saw an object, a pile of cash on wheels. I saw a lifetime of memories. He finally put his phone down. "You know, a guy I know just flipped a '68 Camaro for 60 grand. Easy money." His eyes scanned the Mustang, a greedy glint I chose to ignore. "This one's got to be worth more, at least 80, right?" I paused my polishing and looked at him. "It's not for sale, Tommy." My voice was quiet, but firm. He just shrugged, a dismissive gesture that set my teeth on edge. "Everything's for sale, Grandpa, for the right price." Ugly motivation was starting to take root in him. A week later, I was clearing out an old steel cabinet in the corner of the garage. It was full of forgotten manuals, old rags, and a small tin box where Eleanor kept her seed packets and gardening notes. Tucked beneath a stack of burpee catalogs was her recipe box. It was a simple wooden thing, faded from the sun. I opened it, and the faint smell of cinnamon and dried lavender drifted out. It was a scent I hadn't smelled in years, a punch of pure memory that made my chest ache. Inside, amongst her handwritten cards for apple pie and pot roast, was a folded, yellowed piece of paper. I pulled it out carefully. It was the original bill of sale for the Mustang, dated August 12, 1967. The dealer's letterhead, the typed-out options, The final price of $3,247.58. At the bottom, a signature, not mine. I had bought the car, but Eleanor, ever the meticulous planner, had insisted on handling the finances. It was a sentimental piece of paper, nothing more. A relic of a happier time. Tommy walked in just as I was refolding the receipt. "What's that old thing?" he asked, peering over my shoulder. I showed him. The original sales receipt from 1967. He took it, glanced at it for less than a second, and handed it back with a scoff. "Junk. Why do you keep this stuff? It's just clutter. You should really let me help you clear all this out." He waved a hand dismissively at the cabinet, at my tools, at my entire life's order. He saw nothing of value here but the car. His dismissal of the receipts stung more than I let on. It was a dismissal of Eleanor, of our past, of the meticulous way she built our life together. I carefully placed the paper back among the recipe cards for roasts and cakes and closed the lid. "Some things are worth more than money, son," I said softly. He just rolled his eyes and went back to his phone, already bored. The gulf between us had never felt wider. He didn't know the whole story, and worse, he didn't care to learn it. The trigger came 2 months later. I was at the barber shop, waiting for my turn and flipping through a glossy classic car magazine. And there it was, page 47. A full-color photo of my Mustang, parked in my own driveway. The angle was perfect, catching the afternoon sun on the chrome bumper. The description was sickening. "For sale, meticulously restored 1967 Mustang Fastback, low mileage, one owner, $80,000 OBO. At the bottom was a phone number. It wasn't mine. It was Tommy's. My blood ran cold. The chatter of the barbershop faded into a dull roar in my ears. I tore the page out of the magazine, threw a $10 bill on the counter, and walked out without a word. The drive home was a blur of righteous fury. How could he? How dare he? I remembered teaching a 16-year-old Tommy how to change the oil on that very car. His hands covered in grease, a proud smile on his face. That memory, once a treasure, now felt like a shard of glass in my heart. I confronted him that evening. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He sat at my kitchen table, defiant. "I was going to tell you," he lied, his eyes avoiding mine. "It's for the best, Grandpa. You get a nice chunk of cash, and I get to, start my life." His justification was so pathetic, so transparently selfish. Start your life? By selling my property? By stealing from your own grandfather? My voice was shaking with a rage I hadn't felt in decades. That's when he dropped the bomb. "It's not stealing if you signed it over to me." He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a vehicle title transfer form from the state DMV. And there at the bottom was a signature. My signature. Or at least a very convincing forgery of it. "I found some of your old bank checks. It wasn't hard." He said it so casually, as if admitting to borrowing a cup of sugar. The betrayal was so profound, it left me breathless. He had planned this for weeks. The next day, I drove to the Department of Motor Vehicles, the forged document clutched in my hand. I felt a sliver of hope that a government official would see the truth. I waited in a long line, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and bureaucratic apathy. When I finally reached the counter, a tired-looking woman examined the form, typed my license plate into her computer, and nodded. "Looks like the transfer was processed last Tuesday, sir. It's all in order. The title is now in the name of Thomas Martin, Jr." Her words hit me like a physical blow. "But that's a forgery," I stammered, pointing at the signature. "He forged my name." She gave me a sympathetic, yet utterly unhelpful look. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir. But from our end, the paperwork is valid. If you believe a crime has been committed, you'll have to file a police report and take it up in civil court. This is a family matter." She stamped another form and called next. Without a second glance, my first official attempt to fight back had dissolved into nothing. That hope I felt was quickly turning to despair. I took the clerk's advice and hired a lawyer, a young man named Mr. Davies, whose office was small and smelled of dusty law books. He listened to my story patiently, reviewed the paperwork inside. Mr. Martin, this is tough. Without a witness to the forgery, it becomes your word against your grandson's. He will claim you signed it and simply forgot or changed your mind. They call it buyer's remorse in these family disputes. It was a new, disgusting layer of humiliation. He laid out the grim reality. Fighting this in court will be a long, expensive process. We're talking depositions, handwriting experts, court fees. It could easily cost you $15,000 to $20,000 in legal bills, with no guarantee of winning. A jury might just see a confused old man and a grandson who was given a gift. The lawyer's words were a bucket of ice water. Tommy had not only stolen my car, he'd weaponized my age against me, trapping me in a system that was too costly and slow to help. I left the lawyer's office feeling smaller than I ever had in my 76 years. The world felt sharper and hostile. When I got home, Tommy was there, waiting for me. He had a prospective buyer with him, a man who was walking around the Mustang, running his hands over the paint. "This is Mr. Henderson," Tommy said, all smiles. "He's very interested. He's an out-of-state buyer, so we need to move fast. He wants to have it shipped in 7 days." The ticking clock had started. My window to act was closing rapidly. The sight of a stranger touching my car, appraising it like a flab of meat, made me physically ill. This was my first major public humiliation, my powerlessness displayed for all to see in my own sacred space. I retreated into the house, the sound of their cheerful negotiations echoing behind me. I sat at the kitchen table, the one where Eleanor and I had shared thousands of meals, and felt a profound sense of defeat. Tommy had thought of everything. He had me, legally and financially, cornered. Later that night, unable to sleep, I went back to the garage. The harsh fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I ran my hand along the cool metal of the driver's side door. The scent of wax and well-tended leather was a comfort, a reminder of who I was. I opened the door and sat inside, the seat molding to me perfectly. I saw the faint scuff mark on the dashboard where Tommy, as a boy, had kicked his muddy sneaker. The memory was now tainted, another good thing he had spoiled with his greed. My gaze fell on the old steel cabinet in the corner. On an impulse, I walked over and opened it. I took out Eleanor's recipe box, the wood smooth and familiar in my hands. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just a connection to a time when things made sense, a time before this bitter betrayal. I lifted the lid, the scent of cinnamon and lavender, a weak ghost of its former self. My fingers brushed against the stacks of cards, searching for an answer I knew wasn't there. And there it was again, the yellowed, folded sales receipt from 1967. Tommy's dismissive word echoed in my mind, junk. I pulled it out, my hands trembling slightly. It felt different this time, heavier. It was a symbol of everything I had lost. My car, my trust and family, my connection to the past. I unfolded it under the stark garage light, my eyes scanning the old tight lines, not for sentiment, but for something, anything I might have missed. My heart pounded the slow, heavy rhythm of despair. What was I even hoping to find? The next day brought a new, calculated cruelty. A certified letter arrived. It was from Tommy's lawyer, a formal cease and desist notice. It stated I was prohibited from interfering with the lawful sale of the vehicle, title to which was now held by Thomas Martin Jr. It even included a warning that if I set foot in the garage while a potential buyer was present, he would have me cited for trespassing on my own property. The letter was designed to break me, to make me feel like a stranger in my own home. That afternoon, desperate for a friendly face, I drove to the local diner, a place I'd been going for 30 years. I sat in my usual booth, nursing a cup of black coffee that tasted like ash. That's when I saw him. Tommy was in a booth near the back with 2 of his friends, laughing loudly. He was bragging. I couldn't hear every word, but snippets drifted over the clatter of plates and conversation. 80 grand, cash. Old man didn't know what hit him. Too senile to even fight it. His friends roared with laughter. One of them slapped him on the back. "Your grandpa's a pushover, man." Tommy's chest puffed out. "Told you, it's just a car. He can't even drive it anymore." I needed the money. Hearing his flimsy justification repeated as a boast, as a joke among friends, was a chilling new level of betrayal. It wasn't just about money. It was about power, about the thrill of putting one over on the old man. The coffee turned bitter in my stomach. I slid out of the booth and left before he saw me. The 7-day clock was ticking. 4 days left until the transport truck was scheduled to arrive. My lawyer, Mr. Davies, called with more bad news. Tommy's lawyer has filed a preemptive motion for a declaratory judgment, he explained, his voice tired. They're asking the court to officially declare Tommy the rightful owner to prevent any future claims from you. They're boxing us in, Martin. They're making it legally impossible for you to challenge the sale after the car is gone. My final legal avenue was being paved over before I could even walk down it. I was at my lowest point, beaten, humiliated, and legally outmaneuvered. I sat in my armchair that night, the house silent around me. The recipe box was on the end table next to me. I brought it in from the garage, though I didn't know why. It felt like the only piece of my old life that was left. It now symbolized my profound loss. I opened it and took out the old sales receipt, one more time, my fingers tracing the faded ink. It was a document of my defeat. A worthless piece of paper. Junk, just like Tommy said. And then my eyes caught it. Something I had seen a dozen times, but never truly registered. It wasn't my signature. It wasn't even just my wife's name. It was the way her name was written. Not just Eleanor Martin. The line read, "The Eleanor Martin Revocable Trust." My breath caught in my throat. Eleanor, my quiet, meticulous planner. She had set up a trust decades ago for our major assets as a way to avoid probate court. A simple estate planning tool. Could it be? Was it possible the Mustang was never technically mine to sign away? A jolt of adrenaline, the first I felt in weeks, shot through me. I scrambled to my feet and went to the roll-top desk in the study, a place I hadn't touched since she passed. I fumbled with the key and opened it. Inside, just as she'd told me years ago and I'd forgotten, was a file labeled Estate. I pulled out the trust documents, my hands shaking so badly I could barely read the print. I scanned the pages, my heart hammering against my ribs, and there it was. Listed under the Schedule of Assets, 1967 Ford Mustang, VIN 8F02C10045. The trust document was ironclad. Upon her death, all assets within the trust passed solely to me, Martin, as the successor trustee. But the title of the vehicle itself had never been transferred out of the trust's name. On paper, at the state level, the Mustang didn't belong to Martin. It belonged to the Eleanor Martin Revocable Trust, which meant my signature, forged or not, on a title transfer form was completely and utterly worthless. You can't give away something you don't legally own. The aha moment was a silent explosion in my study. Tommy hadn't just forged a document. He had committed a far more serious crime. By signing my name to sell an asset owned by a legal trust, he had engaged in fraudulent conveyance. He hadn't sold my car. He had sold a stolen car. A wave of cold, calculated calm washed over me. The despair was gone, replaced by a chilling clarity. The game had changed. He thought he was playing checkers. But Eleanor, my brilliant Eleanor, had laid out a chessboard for me from 30 years in the past. The next morning, I didn't call my lawyer. Not yet. First, I made a different call. I walked into my clean, organized garage, picked up the phone, and dialed the non-emergency number for the local police department. When the dispatcher answered, my voice was steady and clear. "My name is Martin. I need to report a grand theft auto." I gave her the address and my description of the car, right down to the vehicle identification number that was burned into my memory and printed on the trust documents. An hour later, 2 officers were standing in my driveway. They were young, professional, but had that look of polite skepticism they reserve for family disputes. I invited them inside and laid everything out on the kitchen table: the trust document, the schedule of assets, and the original bill of sale from 1967, showing the trust as the purchaser. "My grandson believes the car is his," I said calmly. "He has a forged title transfer. But as you can see, a car legally belongs to the trust. He had no authority to sell it." One of the officers, a woman named Ramirez, picked up the trust document and read it carefully. She looked at her partner, and his eyebrows shot up. The skepticism vanished, replaced by dawning comprehension. "So, the vehicle is officially the property of this trust entity?" she asked. "That's correct, officer," I replied. She nodded slowly. "And you are the sole trustee?" "I am." She handed the document back to me. "Then this isn't a family dispute, sir. This is felony fraud and theft of property. ... They took my statement with a new sense of urgency. I gave them Tommy's name, his address, and the name of the buyer, Mr. Henderson. I also gave them the date and time the transport truck was due to arrive, Saturday morning, 9 a.m., just 2 days away. Officer Ramirez made a call. "We're entering the vehicle into the National Stolen Vehicle Database right now," she told me. "The VIN will be flagged. Any attempts to transport it across state lines will trigger an immediate alert." Now, it was time to call my lawyer. When I explained the existence of the trust to Mr. Davies, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then he let out a low whistle. "Martin, you magnificent old fox," he said, a newfound respect in his voice. "This changes everything. Their motion for declaratory judgment is dead on arrival. We don't need to prove forgery anymore. We just need to prove ownership, and you have it in black and white." Their entire case just collapsed. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I went about my routine, waiting for the trap to spring. I didn't contact Tommy. I didn't contact the buyer. I let them proceed, blissfully unaware of the legal cliff they were about to drive over. I could feel the gears of justice beginning to turn, slowly but inexorably. The sense of powerlessness I'd felt was gone, replaced by the quiet confidence of a man who knows he's holding a winning hand. The board was set. The pieces were in motion. Friday evening, the day before the sale was to be finalized, my phone rang. It was Tommy. His voice was dripping with condescending pity. "Hey, Grandpa, just calling to let you know the truck will be there at 9 sharp tomorrow. I hope there are no hard feelings. You know, once the 80 grand is cleared, I might even send a little your way, for old time's sake." This final insult, this pathetic offer of charity from my own stolen money, was the last piece I needed. He had no remorse, no idea what was coming. "That's very thoughtful of you, Tommy," I said, my voice as even as a frozen lake. "You do what you think is right." I hung up the phone before he could reply. He would interpret my calm as resignation, my quietness as defeat. He would walk into the garage tomorrow morning with the arrogance of a conquering hero, completely blind to the fact that he was the one walking into an ambush. The smell of cinnamon and lavender seemed to linger in the air, a final, gentle blessing from Eleanor. Saturday morning arrived, bright and cool. At 8:45 a.m., I saw the big transport truck rumble down my quiet suburban street, its diesel engine a low growl that announced the end of the game. It parked in front of my house. A few minutes later, Tommy's car pulled up, followed by another car carrying Mr. Henderson, the buyer. They looked cheerful, expectant. I watched them from my living room window, a silent observer at my own carefully orchestrated drama. Tommy used his copied key to open the garage door with a flourish, revealing the gleaming Mustang inside. He and Henderson walked in, laughing about something. The truck driver got out and began unhooking ramps. They were so confident, so utterly convinced of their victory. They didn't notice the 2 unmarked police cars that had quietly parked at either end of the block. They didn't see Officer Ramirez and her partner get out and begin walking calmly toward my driveway. I stepped out of my front door and walked towards the garage, moving not with the shuffle of a defeated old man, but with a firm, steady stride. I had the trust document and the original sales receipt in a neat file folder in my hand. Tommy saw me coming and his smile tightened. "Here to say your goodbyes," he sneered. "A little late for that." Mr. Henderson looked away, embarrassed to be a witness to this final cruel twist of the knife. That's when Officer Ramirez stepped into the garage. "Thomas Martin, Jr.?" she asked, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable authority that cut through the morning air. Tommy's smart vanished, replaced by a look of utter confusion. "Yeah? What's this about?" he asked, glancing between the officer and me. "We've received a report that this vehicle," she said, gesturing to the Mustang, "has been reported stolen. We'll need to see your proof of ownership." Tommy laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Stolen? That's ridiculous. This is my grandfather. He's just confused. I have the title right here." He fumbled in his pocket and produced the transfer document he was so proud of. He handed it to the officer. "See? Signed and sealed." Officer Ramirez barely glanced at it. "I'm afraid this document is irrelevant," she said, her voice flat. "The vehicle is not registered to Martin. It's registered to a trust." The color drained from Tommy's face. A what?" Mr. Henderson, the buyer, took a half step back, his eyes wide. "What's going on?" he demanded. I stepped forward and handed the file folder to Officer Ramirez's partner. "Here is the registry extract from the DMV and the controlling trust document," I said. "As you'll see, the title was in a trust in my wife's name that passed solely to me as trustee. My grandson had no legal ability to sign it over." "Oh." The officer reviewed the documents and nodded grimly. He turned to a stunned Tommy. "This means the sale is fraudulent and the vehicle is officially stolen property." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Mr. Henderson swore under his breath, realizing his $80,000 cashier's check was now evidence in a felony case. Tommy stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the pure, uncomprehending terror of a boy who had just been caught. "You always," he stammered, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You set me up." I met his gaze, my expression unreadable. "You forged my name and stole my property, Tommy. You built this trap for yourself. I just let you walk into it." Officer Ramirez stepped forward, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. The metallic click echoed in the sudden silence of the garage. It was the sound of a debt being paid in full. Mr. Henderson, recovering slightly, turned his anger on Tommy. "My money! I want my money back! This is criminal!" Tommy, now pale and frantic, tried to back away, glancing toward the open garage door. Officer Ramirez was quick. "You are under arrest for grand theft auto and felony fraud, Thomas Martin, Jr. You have the right to remain silent." As she recited the Miranda warning, Tommy's eyes darted wildly, finally landing on me again, filled not with greed, but pure hatred. He struggled briefly, protesting the charges, claiming I had gifted him the car months ago and was lying now. "He's senile. He can't remember," he shouted. The officers ignored him. They were focused on procedure, their movements tight and efficient. They secured the cuffs behind his back. The public humiliation he had inflicted upon me just days earlier was now reversed, magnified 1,000 times, and witnessed by the buyer, the transport driver, and my distant neighbor, Mr. Gable. Mr. Henderson was shouting into his phone, presumably to his lawyer, his face red with indignation. Officer Ramirez spoke to him sternly. "Sir, your cashier's check is evidence. We advise you to contact your bank immediately to stop payment, but the funds may be frozen pending investigation." Henderson looked devastated. The $80,000 transaction, which Tommy had viewed as his ticket to freedom, had just vanished into legal purgatory, leaving only criminal charges behind. As Tommy was escorted out of the garage, he caught sight of the old wooden recipe box sitting innocently on a nearby shelf, the one I had moved the previous night. He recognized it. He knew exactly what had been inside it. The realization of how spectacularly he had failed, overlooking a single yellowed piece of paper he had dismissed as junk, must have hit him like a physical blow. That irrelevant object, the original sales receipt from 1967, was the precise key to his undoing. "You knew," he yelled, straining against the officer's grip. "You let me think I won. You watched me sell a stolen car." His voice was raw with genuine shock and disbelief. I simply looked at him, the old mechanic who had taught him everything, now watching his student destroy himself. "The moment you decided to forge my name, Tommy," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "you stopped being my grandson. You became a thief, and thieves always get caught." The officers put him in the back of the police cruiser. The transport driver, realizing he wasn't taking a Mustang anywhere, quickly packed up his ramps and drove away. eager to escape the scene. Officer Ramirez returned to me. "The vehicle is now secured as evidence, Mr. Martin. It cannot be moved for the moment, but the charge is clear. We will proceed with the felony filing based on the fraud against the trust." I thanked her, offering a precise, detailed account of the initial confrontation and Tommy's subsequent evasions. I made sure to mention the overheard conversation at the diner, Tommy bragging to his friends as evidence of his criminal intent and lack of remorse. The chain of events, from my initial despair to this dramatic public restoration of my ownership, was now fully documented in officials. Mr. Davies called later that afternoon, jubilant. "They are in a nightmare, Martin. We filed an immediate complaint against Tommy's lawyer for facilitating a fraudulent transaction. The buyer, Henderson, is now fully cooperating with the district attorney. Tommy's only choice is to accept a plea bargain that involves full restitution and zero contact with you. He is facing serious jail time." The trust was perfect leverage. The cleanup was methodical. The Mustang stayed in the garage for another week, tagged with the lease tape, while the documentation was fully processed. I used that time to thoroughly review all of Eleanor's estate documents. I realized her meticulous planning, her insistence that the car, their first major purchase, remain within the trust structure, was not just for taxes. It was a defense mechanism, a quiet, posthumous protection against exactly this type of familial greed. I had to give a formal deposition to the district attorney's office. I walked them through the timeline, the forgery, the dismissal of the trust by Tommy, and his blatant attempt to liquidate the asset before I could respond. I maintained my surgical, precise tone, refusing to allow any emotion to cloud the facts. This was elder justice, executed with cold precision, not personal rage. A few weeks later, the final legal instrument arrived, a court order based on the discovery of the fraudulent conveyance and the existence of the trust, voiding the title transfer entirely and confirming the trust as the rightful owner. This document, the registry extract proving the car was stolen property, was the final confirmation. My ownership was restored, untainted by Tommy's avarice. I visited the bank to deal with the inevitable fallout. Mr. Henderson had successfully stopped the cashier's check, but Tommy had already withdrawn a significant amount of cash, nearly $5,000, from his own account, assuming the rest was secured. This withdrawal was now being scrutinized as part of the fraudulent proceeds, adding further complexity to his charges and guaranteeing he would spend months, if not years, tied up in court. I walked back into the garage after the police tape was removed. The Mustang looked exactly as it had before the ordeal, gleaming, powerful, perfect. The scent of gasoline and old leather was a welcome embrace. I started the engine, the familiar rumble filling the space. It was a sound of vindication. The car wasn't dismetal. It was now a monument to the quiet wisdom of Eleanor. I called my daughter, Tommy's mother, and explained everything, detailing the forgery in the trust. There was silence on the phone, followed by tears of shame and disbelief. She hadn't been involved, but she felt the weight of her son's betrayal. I made it clear that while I was heartbroken over the loss of my grandson, I had zero tolerance for criminal behavior and zero intention of bailing him out, legally or financially. I decided to make a permanent change. The recipe box, the one item that had saved me, was moved from the garage to a secured safe deposit box at the bank, along with the original sales receipt and the final court order. These documents were no longer sentimental relics. They were artifacts of a battle won, instruments of justice. My life settled back into a quiet rhythm. The silence in the house, once filled with the phantom sounds of Eleanor, was now a calm space, no longer agitated by fear or uncertainty. I found peace in the routine, polishing the chrome, organizing my tools, smelling the metallic scent of well-kept machinery. The garage was my sanctuary once more. I sold the Mustang 3 months later, not to Tommy's greedy acquaintances, but to a genuine collector who understood the history and value. I used the money to set up a charitable fund in Eleanor's name, dedicated to teaching vocational skills to underprivileged youth. It felt right to turn the object of Tommy's greed into something good, something lasting. I never saw Tommy again. He served 6 months community supervision, paid heavy fines, and was legally barred from inheriting anything from me or Eleanor's estate. His life of easy money had been replaced by endless court dates and public shame. The memory of him standing in my garage, declaring his victory, was now just a distant, pathetic echo. Sometimes I still walk into the empty space in my garage. It is clean and organized, ready for the next project. I don't miss the car as much as I thought I would. What I reclaimed wasn't the metal, it was my dignity and the vindication of Eleanor's memory. The space felt lighter now, free of the toxic entitlement that had poisoned it. I picked up the file folder containing the final registry extract, the stamp of the court, the official seal, the proof of my precise, cold victory. I placed the documents on the workbench, opened a fresh can of wax, and began cleaning the remnants of the police tape from the floor, my hands moving with the steady, careful competence of the old mechanic I always was. Then, I closed the garage door and walked back toward the quiet house, leaving the past firmly behind me.